Welcome to the October 12th Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority Abatement Academy. My name is Jennifer Nelson, Virginia Institute of Government Assistant Director for Membership and Engagement. The Virginia Institute of Government is the leadership development and community engagement arm of the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service at the University of Virginia. Through our research, leadership development programs, and local government engagement initiatives, we continue to work toward our vision of good governance, equity, and resilience in every Virginia community. VIG offers leadership development through SEI and LEAD, local government equity clinics, certification for treasurers and commissioners of the revenue, and customized training programs. State agencies and local governments can access a range of consultation and support services to build more resilient organizations. We have a team of seasoned public sector leaders and subject matter experts ready and available to facilitate boards of supervisors, city and town councils, leadership teams, strategic planning retreats, and other related events. Today, VIG is glad to partner with the Opioid Abatement Authority for the Abatement Academy series, presented every second and fourth Thursday through 2023. A few housekeeping notes. This session will be recorded and posted on the Weldon Cooper Center for Public Service YouTube channel soon. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat and I will ask them for you. Thanks again for taking the time to join us today for this Abatement Academy session. Now I'm happy to turn things over to Tony McDowell, the Authority's Executive Director. Tony?
Thank you, Jennifer. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this installment of the Abatement Academy. Just a couple of quick announcements. I think as probably many of you who are joining us this morning are already aware, the Opioid Abatement Authority has partnered with Virginia Institute of Government to provide this series of webinar presentations from subject matter experts free of charge. We started back in April of this year, and we're offering a total of 14 different live webinars for the general public and for people that want to learn more about how local communities can make a difference in the opioid crisis through abatement and remediation efforts. We have, after today, we have 3 more sessions left. We encourage you to sign up for those. The next one will be on October 26th and focuses on how to serve diverse individuals in a peer-led recovery community organization. And we have Monique Runge from the Shin Foundation as our presenter for that event. And then on November 9th, we'll be talking about how the community rallied and developed local support to launch a women's treatment facility in Washington County in Abatement, Virginia. And we'll have a number of presenters from that Mended Women Treatment Center presenting. That's on November 9th. And then on December 14th, an interesting presentation, particularly for local governments, on how you can participate and utilize data from the Virginia Framework for Addiction Analysis and Community Transformation, or FACT, which is the state's data warehouse and information platform for addiction-related data. And the presenter for that event will be Leslie Egan from the Department of Criminal Justice Services. So please go to our website for more information on those sessions, and please register and join us for free. Again, all of our webinars are recorded, and then the recording is put on the website so that if you don't have time to attend live in person, you can go back at a later date and observe the sessions. Now, in addition, we're excited to note that we're offering a workshop for local government and nonprofit organizations to support local governments on how to implement best practices in opioid abatement in your community. This in-person workshop is being held in Charlottesville a week from today, so that'll be on Thursday, October 19th. And I've put information about that workshop, including a link to the registration, in the chat. I encourage you to take a look if that interests you. With that as kind of the background and an overview of the Abatement Academy, it's now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers for today. The primary speaker this morning is going to be Danny Livengood from the Office of the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court of Virginia. Danny's the training coordinator for specialty dockets in that office. In this role, he supports educational opportunities for specialty dockets teams and on operational best practices and procedures. His career before joining the Supreme Court of Virginia included 9 years of education-focused positions, including work with the Peace Corps and with AmeriCorps, as well as in both state and federal service. And Danny's going to be the main presenter today, but we're also lucky and privileged to have Anna Powers with us. Anna is a longtime good friend of yours truly, hails from Henrico County, where she ran Henrico County's drug treatment programs before going to work for the Executive Secretary of the Supreme Court, where she is the Specialty Dockets Coordinator, and is truly the sort of the subject matter expert on all things related to specialty dockets and drug courts. So welcome. Thank you very much, Anna and Danny, for being here, for taking the time to provide this presentation. And with that, we'll turn it over. Thank you.
Okay, good morning and welcome to everybody. So today, we're going to be covering 5 different things. We're going to give you a brief overview of what specialty dockets are, and then we'll jump right into how to start, support, or expand specialty dockets from the local level. We'll get a little bit more into specialty dockets operational details, how they work, how they operate, the parameters. We'll talk about data costs and outcomes, and then we'll talk about how specialty dockets and the Opioid Abatement Authority grants and funding can interact. So to start things off, the term dockets, it might be already familiar to you in another sense, but it is not a scheduling of cases or a grouping of like offenses when we're talking about specialty dockets. It's the same word, but it's a different usage here. So Virginia has 3 specialty dockets. These are sometimes called recovery courts, alternative dockets, treatment dockets. Other states call them problem-solving courts. So those are all referring to kind of a similar kind of operation. But here in Virginia, they are called specialty dockets. And we have 3 varieties of them. We have drug treatment court dockets, which are usually just referred to as drug courts. And this is the most common type of docket in Virginia. We also have behavioral or mental health dockets, and then veterans treatment specialty dockets. It is worth noting that behavioral health dockets and veterans treatment dockets participants have between 78 and 80% co-occurrence of mental illness with substance use disorders. So there's a lot of interrelation between the operations and the target populations of these different specialty dockets. Now, how specialty dockets are different is that they use an alternative approach within the court system compared to business as usual. Specifically, specialty dockets operate as an alternative to incarceration. So instead of long-term incarceration, specialty dockets participants voluntarily participate in extended duration, that's 10 to 15 months, sometimes longer based on their progress, of evidence-based treatment to develop recovery tools and gain life and coping skills necessary to rebuild their lives. These dockets use judicial monitoring of this intensive treatment and strict supervision of participants, with the participants primarily receiving treatment in the community. So for participants, specialty dockets entails frequent court appearances, and for those diagnosed with substance use disorder, this also involves frequent drug testing of 3 screens per week. It involves collaborative team efforts working together to combine comprehensive treatment with intensive supervision and monitoring. That treatment can include group treatment sessions, maybe 3 times a week, as well as individual counseling sessions, as well as medication as appropriate. The collaborative efforts involve a host of multidisciplinary team members, so it can involve the court, the Commonwealth's attorney, defense attorney, specialty docket administrators, case managers and or probation officers, substance use clinicians, law enforcement officers, and others depending on the type of docket, behavioral health or drug court and so on. So, now we're going to jump into how to start a specialty docket. As an overview, the major pieces are, first and foremost, you have to find a locally interested judge. That is kind of the key factor to getting things rolling. After that, we encourage you to contact us, the Specialty Dockets team, as we are happy to help answer questions and give those guidance materials. Next up will be, the big goal will be establishing that interdisciplinary planning committee, and then completing and submitting the application. There are different applications depending on the type of docket. Again, one application for drug court, a different one for behavioral health docket, and a different one for the veterans treatment docket. And we have this application process because the statute says dockets need to be approved. So that is a feature of the origin of these specialty dockets. Let's get into the details though. So you identify your judge, and that judge may contact the Chief Justice with the intention to plan a specialty docket. Local officials will then form a planning committee and complete a planning process recognized by the corresponding state docket advisory committee before establishing a specialty docket. That planning team needs to include a judge, a prosecutor, public defender or defense attorney, treatment representatives, specialty docket coordinator or planning coordinator, or probation or law enforcement, and a host of other people depending again on the particular docket that you are involved. Now, it is relevant to note that the statute that authorized specialty dockets operations outlines an authorization process, and it specifically says a circuit or district court which intends to establish one or more types of these recognized specialty dockets must petition the Supreme Court of Virginia for authorization. The petitioning court must demonstrate sufficient local support for the establishment of the specialty docket. Now, if you see in that list there, the only state official is the judge. Everybody else is a local authority, a local government employee. And the reason for this is the best practices and all the research behind how to make drug courts and other specialty dockets effective means that the local support needs to be substantially present. So the statute that includes this recognizes the research that prioritizes local efforts and local backing, not kind of the top level state operations, but it's the local efforts that really form the bulk of the operations on specialty dockets teams. Once you have your planning committee organized, you're going to schedule required training. There are different trainings, again, depending on which kind of specialty docket you're forming. And then you will complete an application to establish the specialty docket. So each, as mentioned before, there is a different type of application. And here's the link. All these resources will be shared with you via attachment to all attendees and registrants. Next, you're going to submit the application for state advisory committee review. So there's a little bit of overlap in the language. Before we were talking about the planning committee, here we're talking about the state advisory committee. So at the upper level of the state, each type of specialty docket has a particular advisory committee, a state advisory committee, who then reviews and, amongst other things, reviews the applications for approval. After approval, the planning committee establishes the local advisory committee. The planning committee is to get things rolling. They get the blueprint together, they get a lot of the criteria, they go through a lot of the training, and a lot of those players, a lot of those members will end up being part of the more permanent advisory committee. But the planning committee kind of dissolves, and then they lay into this larger organization, this advisory committee, again, with a lot of the same team members. This is going to be the judge, the Commonwealth attorney, or defense attorney, representative from community corrections and pretrial service. Again, a similar list, but it extends into other things that are outlined by statute who needs to be on that advisory committee. And these are the folks that maintain the operations. They refine and establish criteria for the eligibility and participation of offenders. They establish policies and procedures for the operation of the docket to comply with national best standards. And they are the ones who maintain and adjust and manage those features of the specialty docket. In terms of expanding or supporting existing specialty dockets. So what we mean by expanding is to expand an existing docket into a new or extended locality. And this follows the same procedure of application as starting a new docket from scratch. I mean, hopefully you'd have some of the resources already in play and some of the major support pieces and formula. But the reason why we have it start from scratch is because of the importance of that local support. We need to see the evidence of that local support because that's what makes a successful specialty docket operation. Now, in terms of supporting specialty dockets, existing specialty dockets, there's a few pieces. So first off, you can request to participate on any of the standing committees for the Drug Treatment Court Advisory Committee. You could help encourage your local jail or regional jail to get the Veteran Reentry Search Service training. This trains jails to identify veterans that are incarcerated to help identify where veterans dockets could be established in the state. And you can encourage executive branch partners such as state probation officers, local probation officers, and community service board clinicians and case managers to assist specialty dockets without requesting the specialty docket to pay for the staff salary. One of the big pieces, another big piece of a really successful specialty docket operations is to have these dedicated and funded staff members that can really pay attention to the operation. So that, for example, the specialty docket coordinator, which can make a big difference in growing the program and making sure it's adhering to best practices and operating and kind of making the docket successful. Lastly, come speak with us, right? So if you are interested in about getting one of these motivated, I do want to reiterate that this office, the Specialty Dockets Office in Judicial Services, is here to support those efforts in expanding and supporting these the support and starting of the dockets. So let's rewind a little bit. Let's talk a little bit more about specialty dockets operational details. Specifically, I want to talk about the target population, the methodologies we use, graduate outcomes, and then what is happening in Virginia right now in terms of these specialty dockets. So target population is a very significant stipulation and element of what constitutes specialty dockets. Specialty dockets and drug courts in particular are the most research-based intervention for getting people out of the cycle of incarceration. So there's a mountain of research on what makes successful operations and how successful they can be when done well. So part of that research is making sure that the correct kinds of participants are involved in the specialty dockets program. One of the different specialty dockets have different conditions. So drug court, by statute, by legal statute, it can only have participants that are nonviolent offenders. The offense that they have, it has to be drug related or drug motivated. What I mean by that is drug related offense might be possession, for example. Drug motivated might be larceny in order to support substance use. So even though the offense that was committed was not a drug related offense, the context of the situation deemed that it still has drug involvement and drug motivation, and that it can be a criteria that can be an eligibility factor for being a participant in drug court. The primary diagnosis has to be that has a substance use disorder. I'm going to come back to that in a second. And then moderate to high risk and need. So there are evaluation tools for risk and need assessment. So by risk, we're talking about criminogenic risk. The likelihood in the future that the risk that this person is going to be a repeat offender in the future. The criminogenic need assessment, the need assessment is a clinical need assessment. And again, that has a relation to do with their diagnosis. Let's look over here at behavioral health. It does not have the stipulation that it has to be nonviolent offenders. That's not a requirement for the behavioral health specialty docket. The mental illness has to be related to the current offense and the primary diagnosis of serious mental illness. So here we see this. I want to come back to this primary diagnosis. So again, earlier on in this presentation, I talked about the co-occurrence, the high level of co-occurrence, 78 to 80% of co-occurrence between substance use disorder and serious mental illness, meaning in all likelihood, an eligible participant has both of these conditions. So then which court they go involved in, which docket they get involved in, drug court or behavioral health, might depend on which one of their diagnoses is primary, if they're related to the offense that they committed. So if it's the serious mental illness that's primary, then that they would be considered for the behavioral health docket, and alternatively the drug court. Veterans docket has a combination of resources that can support behavioral health related kind of participants or drug court related participants. But there's an expanded offering of services via special veterans already existing operations and services. And so where veterans treatment dockets exists, that can be a prominent and successful tool, because there are expanded resources that already exist for veterans. So they can have either substance use disorder or a serious mental illness and be part of the specialty dockets program. In terms of methodology, there are 4 major components that I want to mention here. First is that specialty dockets are evidence-based and use evidence-based treatment, which can include moral recognition therapy, MET, and again, the actual drug courts themselves are the most researched criminal justice intervention. So this methodology and all the particular best practices that are employed are in line with these national standards of research best practices for what ends up making the difference that we're looking for. The court can impose reinforcing or reprimanding consequences on behavior to encourage compliance and graduation. So examples of reinforcement can include public recognition, praise from the judge, certificates, gift cards, movie passes. Some of that might seem a little bit small, such as praise from the judge. But in the situation, these factors can actually have a significant impact on the participants, compliance with the program, with the specialty docket, on their compliance with the rules and outlines and expectations, because of the history and their kind of relationship with the court system in the past. This change of tone, for example, praise from a judge when they put forth special effort and it's recognized, ends up having these actually significant, can have these significant consequences, positive consequences for participants and their relationship with the docket program and expectations. Examples of reprimands can include essays like day reporting, life skill assignments, loss of privileges, earlier curfew, as well as flash jail incarcerations. Special dockets also provide collateral services, which can be things like assistance towards employment, housing, medication, and transportation as available and needed. So successful graduation of the drug court results in reduced or dismissed charges, reduced or set aside incarceration sentences, or a combination. So these are the elements that we use to draw in, because as mentioned before, again, this is an option for people. This is something they voluntarily opt in for when they are an eligible candidate. So once established as eligible, and requested to enter the court, it's something offered to them. This is not a court-ordered or court-required program in that sense. So what do we have going on in Virginia? As mentioned before, our drug courts is the most prominent kind of specialty docket in Virginia. This map is a little bit out of date. There's a couple not included additions, but we have 50 operational adult drug courts. We also have, not shown here, 1 DUI treatment court, 5 family treatment dockets, and 3 juvenile dockets. Overall, there are 63 drug treatment courts in Virginia. We also have 18 operational behavioral health dockets. Again, the map isn't fully up to date. There's a couple of more recent additions here. And finally, we have 8 operational veterans dockets. So we've talked a lot about what dockets are and how to start them. Now let's talk about, I want to go into a little bit about why they're important and what they accomplish. The big thing is that they work, right? So they work research-wide, nationwide, they work in Virginia. On 3 different levels, I want to focus on the impact that they can make. So first off, the recidivism rates are lower. Second, they reduce costs, and then they provide recovery services. That can include mental health and substance use treatment, and that may not be available in incarceration or otherwise. Overall, these specialty dockets are so successful because they teach self-management of recovery. This is a needed skill for a lot of these people that are in and out of the court system over and over again, because incarceration doesn't allow for that education. In many cases, it tends to be the case that the lower pull the higher down, not the other way around, right? So once they're involved in those environments, it tends to escalate into an ever worse situation and not kind of bring people up for these folks in this situation. So I'm going to introduce some data here. Now, out of personal preference, I always like to be very clear about what the data is communicating, what it says, and what it isn't. So this data is going to be looking at reconviction rates. And I'm using that word very specifically. So recidivism, that term, recidivism, is technically defined by different organizations in different ways. And because of that, it's like talking about apples and oranges. You can't compare recidivism rate data directly. But we can dig into the data and look specifically at reconviction rates. The reason we have the 3 years after, exit component here is because we're looking for sustained recovery, right? So the short-term impact. So what this data is showing us here is it comes from the specialty dockets annual reports. And in a second, I'm going to bring up the Virginia Department of Corrections as of January 2023 published a report called Recidivism at a Glance, in which they detail their component of the data. But what we have here, the solid lines are the actual reconviction rates 3 years after exit. So somebody graduates, for example, the blue line here, graduates from a drug court program, and after 3 years, around 18% of those people, depending on the year, around 18% of those then get reconvicted again, which means that 88% do not. 88% do not have re-involvement in the courts to the level of reconviction. For our non-graduates, that statistic is around 29%. So it is the non-graduates, that means either termination or voluntary withdrawal. But they oftentimes had a mean stay for these tracked numbers of about 14 months. And so this preliminary evidence suggests that those who are non-graduates but still involved for a longer period of time also have provided benefits. So by comparison, the Department of Corrections has a reconviction rate of about 46% within 3 years of exiting incarceration. Let's look at this in a slightly different way. So these trend lines are, again, I want to be clear about what this data is saying. These trend lines are tracking the report averages. So every year that we issue a report, it tends to be around 18% for graduates and around 29% for non-graduates, whereas the Department of Corrections is around 46%. So let's look at these trend lines again. By comparison. So one thing I do want to point out is this all offenders component. So they are not explicitly comparable populations, right? It's not just offenders in this data here who have comparable legal situations to our drug court participants. However, in a news press release by the Virginia Department of Corrections, they recognize that the inmates with the history of testing, I quote, inmates with a history of testing positive for both opioids and cocaine had a reincarceration rate substantially higher than those with no history of testing positive for opioids and cocaine. in effect, we're talking about how this population, the folks that had who were testing positive, meaning the folks that would be more in our camp of things, when they're incarcerated, instead that drives up their recidivism metric. So that drives this number up. If it was separated out, it's going to be some number higher than 56% for comparable populations. In terms of cost, so what do we, how much do we have to pay for all this added benefit? Well, about just under $20,000 less compared to traditional case processing. So it is an efficient use, it is an efficient financial use of resources to use these specialty docket programs to benefit in terms of outcomes for the participants and for their communities, as well as expenses for the state. So lastly, I want to start touching on how the Opioid Abatement Authority is operating with specialty dockets. So first off, I want to recognize that the Opioid Abatement Authority has approved a $500,000 grant towards the development of a statewide best practices and standards for drug testing in all specialty dockets, as well as establishing a mini grant program to offer financial assistance to localities to help pay for drug testing. But that's not all that's going on. So what you can do, what your locality can apply for OAA grant funds can be for planning a specialty docket, or it can be used to fund parts or pieces of a specialty docket, such as drug testing, treatment resources, local staff positions, training supplies, as well as those collateral services that I mentioned earlier. So those are the kinds of things that the OAA grant funds can be included. In Virginia, a lot of that stuff is happening. So the Upper 10th Circuit applied for funds for planning a drug court grant. The Prince George and Surrey counties are applying for funds to establish a crisis stabilization center. A combination of Grayson County, Carroll County, and Galax County were collectively approved for $260,000 award to enhance their recovery docket, and it goes up from there. So a big partnership, including Montgomery County, Giles County, Floyd County, Pulaski County, and Radford City, was awarded $3.5 million for the New River Valley ecosystem of recovery, with expansion of inpatient treatment, medication for opioid use disorders, and enhancement of transportation and recovery court clinicians and more. Lastly, there's a partnership which included Smith County, Bland County, Carroll County, Grayson County, Wythe County, and Galax City, was awarded $1 million for expanding an office-based opioid treatment services and medication for opioid use disorders. So there's a lot going on here in terms of how the Opioid Abatement Authority is involved in the specialty dockets operation already in Virginia, and there's lots more to be explored. We have a video for you, but we're going to switch screens here for a second to make sure that you all can hear the audio.
And they're trying to get money to purchase their drugs.
I thought it was all fun and games, and next thing you know, you got a problem and you can't seem to want to get out of bed and do anything in the morning without them.
First turned to drugs when I was in my teens, and after that I just kept making one poor decision after another.
So it takes away their self-worth. They feel like that they're not able to work. They're not able to do the kind of things that any normal person would do.
Everything was passing me by, and I was content to sit there and snort pills and try to hide from everything in the world.
I was always so high. I never realized how I was neglecting my kids.
I had my son in prison, and I thought when I came home, I learned my lesson, and I didn't.
The old revolving door come through, they would go do their time, they would get out, then they would be back in. If we've been doing this for 15, 20, 25 years, and we do not have less drugs on our streets, then what we have been doing hasn't been successful, and we need to try an alternative, which I believe drug court is not only an alternative, but can be a successful alternative.
What do I got to do? They said, well, it's real strict. You will go to classes, and you got to stay clean. You got to stay off the dope.
They have to get up. They have to come to drug court. They have to get a job. They have to work. They have to do community service. They're drug screened 3 times a week to make sure that they're remaining clean.
If they decide they want to make that change, then drug court is here to give them all the support and help that we can.
Having people to talk to, he has, somebody other than me to talk to.
We are rehabilitating people and putting them back in the community for a fraction of the cost it takes us to incarcerate them. It's more than dollars and cents. It is a person's life.
You're not just saving that person's life, you're saving their kids' lives, you're saving their families' lives. You're saving a lot of people down the road.
It's gave me the opportunities and the tools to get my life back on track and to lead me to a future for me and my son that I want to be in. There's nothing more than to be able to watch that boy look at you with the pride in his eyes. Hey, he loves you and he's proud of you.
You never realized what you had until it was almost gone.
It's changed my life, made me a better person.
It's made my life, my freedom.
It showed me that I can actually enjoy life without getting high.
They're no longer taking resources by being incarcerated. They're giving back to the community. They are now a taxpayer of our community and are making a positive impact in a lot of different ways.
And that's the end of the presentation. We invite you to enter into the chat any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Danny, for sharing this information about alternative for specialty dockets in Virginia. I've sat in Chesterfield County's drug court, and it's very impactful, very impactful. While we wait for questions to come in, I did want to let everyone know that the next round of opioid abatement grants is now open, and we're going to be having a couple of sessions to let you know about how to apply for them. Tony, did you want to say any words about these?
Yes, thank you, Jennifer, for that. So as she mentioned, we opened up the next round of grant applications for cities and counties last week, or actually 2 weeks ago, October 1st. And we've got a couple of different types of grants that cities and counties can apply for. Every city and county in Virginia has a certain amount of money that we're holding on your behalf that you're eligible to receive. But all you have to do is submit an application that meets the criteria, and the money is yours. And in addition to that, we also offer some competitive grants that are really focused on cooperative partnerships where localities join together into a partnership and apply for programs that benefit their larger collective region. And so on Tuesday morning next week, Tuesday the 17th at 10:30 in the morning, Charlie Linticum from our team will be giving a live webinar with an overview of the application process for completely new programs, completely new projects. All that information is on our website, and we'll be typing that into the chat as well. So that's Tuesday the 17th at 10:30 in the morning, and it's interactive, so you can ask questions during that piece. And then on the 18th, which is the next day at 10:30, same time, Charlie will be giving another webinar to talk about the process for submitting amendments and renewals and changes to existing projects, as well as using some of the new guidance that we have made adjustments to since last year. And so again, all that information is on our website, and we'll type that information into the chat here.
Great. Thank you, Tony. So Danny, one question has come in, and I see that you answered it, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to expand on that if you'd like. Are the stated reconviction rates gathered from all incarcerated facilities or just the Virginia DOC prisons?
And yeah, we did collect those from the Virginia Department of Corrections specifically because we wanted state-specific comparison data. So those are not national figures. One of the complications, again, is in differences in terminology and reporting standards. There's a lot of parallels in this data with the 3-year comparison time frame as well as the specific category of reconviction rates versus rearrest or recidivism, more generally defined reincarceration. So, but those are from the Virginia Department of Corrections.
And did this include regional and local jails in Virginia?
Anna, would you like to weigh in on that? I believe the Department of Corrections data collects from all of those sources. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think because it was a Department of Corrections report, it was primarily VA-DOC. But we did include the link to the source of the information for that clarification. It's not our research. We took it from the document we provided the link to. But I believe it's just VA-DOC, the Virginia prisons, not the regional and local jails.
Okay, and we will be including Danny's slide presentation with our follow-up email. If there aren't any other questions, I do want to thank you again, Danny, for the presentation, and Anna for helping out with some clarifications on everything. I hope that more people consider having specialty dockets in Virginia, and let's get that whole map filled up. Michelle, we will be getting the copy of the PowerPoint to you in a follow-up email. So if there's nothing else, no other questions, I want to thank you again, and please join us for more Opioid Abatement Authority sessions. Thank you, everyone.